You think you know what betrayal looks like? Wait until you see a woman carry champagne glasses to the man who destroyed her, with a smile on her face and a secret in her pocket that would bring the whole reception to its knees. 3 years after he left her standing alone in a white dress in front of 200 people, Celeste Dubois walked into his wedding reception in a black uniform and a name tag that said, Staff. She poured his wine. She served his cake. She watched his new bride throw the bouquet. And she didn't say a single word. Not until the last dance. Not until the microphone was free. Not until every guest was listening. Hello and welcome. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. If you've been with us before, thank you for coming back. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Miami, Cape Town, maybe Port of Spain or Birmingham? We want to hear from you. Now let me take you back. Back 6 years, to a town called Bellevue. Not the big one you might be thinking of. A small one. A town with one main street, 2 traffic lights, and a diner called Rosie's where everybody went on Saturday mornings for pancakes and gossip. The kind of town where people waved at each other from their porches and knew whose truck was parked where, and could tell you what your grandmother ordered for lunch last Tuesday. The kind of town where secrets didn't stay secret for long, unless someone worked very, very hard to keep them buried. Celeste Dubois was 24 years old when this story starts. She had a face that people remembered even when they tried not to. High cheekbones, dark brown eyes that tilted up slightly at the corners, and lips that always looked like she was about to say something important. Her skin was deep brown, smooth and warm, like polished wood in sunlight. She wore her hair natural, a crown of coils she pinned up during work and let fall around her shoulders in the evenings. She was not tall, 5'4" maybe, but she carried herself like she was. Straight back, chin up, a walk that said, I am here, and I'm not apologizing for it. She worked at the Bellevue Public Library. Not a glamorous job. The library was small, 1 floor, 4 rooms, a children's section with beanbag chairs that leaked tiny white pellets onto the carpet, and a back office that smelled like old paper and the lavender air freshener Celeste kept on the windowsill. She made $14 an hour. She shelved books, ran the reading program for kids every Thursday afternoon, helped elderly residents use the computers, and closed up at 7 every night by herself. She loved that library. She loved the quiet of it. She loved the way light came through the tall windows in the afternoons and fell across the reading tables in long, golden rectangles. She loved the children who came in with sticky fingers and wide eyes and picked books based entirely on the covers. She loved being the person who said, "Let me help you find what you're looking for." Celeste lived in a small yellow house at the end of Maple Lane. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window over the sink that looked out onto a magnolia tree, and a porch with a rocking chair her father had made before he died. Her father, Alain Dubois, had been a carpenter. A quiet man from Louisiana with sawdust permanently embedded in the lines of his palms, and a voice so low and gentle it sounded like a cello playing in another room. He died when Celeste was 17. Heart attack. Sudden. One morning he was sanding a chair in the garage. That afternoon he was gone. Celeste found him. She never talked about finding him. She just carried it inside her like a stone she couldn't put down. Her mother, Vivienne, was 58 now. A small woman with silver hair she wore in 2 braids and hands that shook when she was tired, which was most of the time. Vivienne had rheumatoid arthritis. Her fingers were swollen at the knuckles, bent slightly inward, like they were trying to hold on to something that wasn't there. She lived with Celeste in the yellow house. She couldn't work anymore. She spent her days in the rocking chair on the porch, reading romance novels with cracked spines from the library, and feeding breadcrumbs to a family of sparrows that nested in the magnolia tree. There was also a girl. A little girl named Rosalie. Rosalie was not Celeste's daughter. She was her niece, the child of Celeste's older brother Jean-Pierre, who lived in another city and sent money when he remembered, which was not often. Rosalie's mother had left when Rosalie was 2. Just left. A note on the counter that said, "I can't do this," and a car pulling out of the driveway at 4 in the morning. Jean-Pierre tried for a year. Then he called Celeste and said, "I can't do this alone." Celeste said, "Bring her to me." Rosalie was 6 now, small for her age, with enormous brown eyes and hair that Celeste braided every morning in 2 neat plaits with colored beads at the ends that clicked when she moved her head. Rosalie was shy. She hid behind Celeste's legs when strangers spoke to her. But when she was comfortable, when she was home in the yellow house with the magnolia tree outside and Vivian in the rocking chair, she sang. Little songs she made up about birds and rain and the color of the sky before bedtime. She had a voice like a bell that someone had dipped in honey. Now, let me tell you about the man. Nathan Cross was 27 when he met Celeste. He was from Bellevue too, though he had been away for college and came back like a lot of young men come back to small towns, with a degree, a restlessness, and a sense that he was meant for something bigger than 2 traffic lights and Saturday pancakes. He was handsome in a way that was hard to ignore, tall, light-skinned, with a square jaw and green eyes and a smile that arrived slowly, like he was deciding whether you deserved it. He had large hands that he talked with, always moving, always gesturing, like his words needed a body to carry them. He worked at his family's car dealership on the edge of town, Cross Motors. It wasn't a big operation, a lot with 40 cars, a showroom with glass windows and American flags, and a back office where Nathan's father, Walter Cross, sat behind a desk the size of a dining table and made deals over the phone with a toothpick in his mouth. Walter was 61, a broad man with a red face and a laugh that sounded like gravel rolling downhill. He had built Cross Motors from nothing. 1 lot, 1 loan, 40 years of handshakes and hustle. He was proud of it in the way that men who build things with their hands are proud, fiercely, possessively, and with a deep suspicion of anyone who hadn't built something of their own. Nathan and Celeste met at Rosie's diner on a Saturday morning. Celeste was there with Rosalie, who was eating a pancake shaped like a bear. Nathan was at the counter, drinking coffee and reading something on his phone. Rosalie dropped a crayon. It rolled across the floor and stopped at Nathan's shoe. He picked it up. It was purple. He walked it over to the table and handed it to Rosalie and said, "I think this belongs to you." Rosalie looked at him with those enormous eyes and said, "That's my favorite color." Nathan smiled, the slow smile, and said, "Mine too." Celeste watched this exchange. She watched how he crouched down to be at Rosalie's level, how he didn't rush, how he looked at the child like she was a real person and not just a small inconvenience between him and his coffee. Something inside Celeste shifted, not dramatically, quietly, like a window opening an inch. But what happened next changed everything. They dated for 2 years. Long, slow, careful years. Celeste did not trust easily. She had learned from her father's death and her brother's absence and Rosalie's mother's note on the counter that people leave. They just leave. And the ones who stay are rare enough that you should hold on to them with everything you have, but also prepare yourself for the morning you wake up and find the other side of the bed empty. Nathan was patient. He came to the yellow house for dinner every Sunday. He learned Vivian's favorite tea, chamomile with honey and a slice of lemon so thin you could see through it. He played with Rosalie in the yard, pushing her on the tire swing Celeste had hung from the magnolia tree. He sat on the porch with the rocking chair and talked to Vivian about her romance novels, and Vivian would say, "This one's good, Nathan. The man in this one has a jaw like yours." Nathan would laugh. Vivian would laugh. The sparrows would scatter and come back. He told Celeste he loved her after 8 months. They were sitting on the porch after Rosalie had gone to bed. The sky was purple, and the air smelled like magnolia blossoms, and he said, "I love you, Celeste. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's true, and I'm tired of not saying true things." Celeste looked at him and said, "I love you too, but love scares me more than anything in this world." Nathan took her hand and said, "Then we'll be scared together." He proposed on a Thursday evening. Nothing fancy. He came to the library at closing time with a ring he had bought with 3 months of savings, not from the dealership, from money he made fixing cars on the side, money that was his alone, not his father's. He got down on one knee between the fiction shelves, right between the M's and the N's, and said, "Celeste Dubois, Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that not everyone leaves?" Celeste looked at this man on his knee, with his large hands trembling, and a ring that wasn't expensive but was honest, and she said, "Yes." Rosalie was the flower girl. Vivian would sit in the front row. The wedding was planned for June. 200 guests. The Baptist Church on Elm Street. Reception at the Bellevue Community Hall. Celeste's dress was simple, white, fitted at the waist, with sleeves that came to her elbows because she said strapless dresses made her feel like she was falling. She found it at a second-hand shop 2 towns over and altered it herself on Vivian's old sewing machine, the one with the foot pedal that stuck. And that was only the beginning of the end. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan started acting different. Not dramatically, quietly. The way weather changes before a storm. The air shifts, the birds go silent, the light turns a color that doesn't have a name. He canceled a Sunday dinner. He said work was busy. He canceled the next one too. He stopped coming to the library at closing time. When Celeste called, he answered, but the conversations were shorter. The words were the same, but the music behind them had changed. Celeste felt it. She didn't say it out loud because saying it would make it real, and she was still hoping she was wrong. She ironed his suit for the wedding. She addressed the last batch of invitations. She picked up Rosalie's flower girl dress, a tiny white dress with a ribbon at the waist, and hung it on the back of the bedroom door where she could see it every morning. 1 week before the wedding, Celeste drove to the dealership to bring Nathan lunch. She did this sometimes. A sandwich from Rosie's and a bottle of water and a napkin with a little note. She learned that from stories on the internet. Small acts of love, written in ink. She pulled into the lot and parked and walked toward the showroom. Through the glass windows, she could see Nathan in the back office. He was standing close to someone. A woman. Tall. Blonde hair. A cream-colored dress. They were laughing. Nathan's hand was on the woman's arm. Celeste stood in the parking lot with a sandwich going cold in her hand. She didn't go inside. She got back in her car and drove home. She sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Then she went inside, kissed Rosalie, and started making dinner. She didn't ask Nathan about the woman. She told herself it was a customer, a colleague. Nothing. She told herself this because the wedding was in 7 days, and the dress was hanging on the bedroom door, and 200 people had RSVP'd, and Rosalie had been practicing walking slowly down the aisle for 3 weeks, counting her steps out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, with her beaded braids clicking at every number. But the truth was far worse than anyone imagined. The day of the wedding, June 14th, bright and warm and perfect. The Baptist Church on Elm Street had white flowers on every pew. Vivian was in the front row in a lavender dress, her swollen hands folded in her lap, her eyes already wet. Rosalie stood at the back of the church in her tiny white dress, holding a basket of rose petals, counting under her breath. 200 people filled the pews. Friends, family, neighbors, co-workers, the woman from Rosie's diner, the children from the Thursday reading program, the entire town, it felt like. Celeste stood in a small room off the entrance. She was dressed, ready. Her hair was up, pinned with the same bobby pins she always used, plus a small white flower Vivian had tucked behind her ear that morning with shaking fingers and a whisper, "You look like your father's dream." The music started. The processional. Rosalie walked down the aisle, dropping petals, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. The congregation smiled. The doors at the back of the church opened fully. Celeste appeared, and the altar was empty. Not empty of flowers, not empty of candles, empty of Nathan. The pastor stood there. The best man stood there. The groomsmen stood there. But the space where Nathan Cross was supposed to be, the space where a man should have been standing, watching the woman he loved walk toward him, was vacant. A hole in the shape of a promise. Murmuring, shifting. The best man pulled out his phone. The pastor leaned toward the groomsmen. Celeste stood at the end of the aisle in her second-hand dress with her hands gripping a bouquet of white roses and her legs made of cement. She couldn't move forward and she couldn't move back. She just stood there while 200 people slowly realized what was happening. 15 minutes. That's how long they waited. Someone called Nathan. No answer. Someone drove to his apartment. Empty. Someone called Walter at the dealership. Walter answered. His voice was strange, flat, careful, like a man reading a script. He said Nathan had left town that morning. He said Nathan was sorry. He said Nathan had gone with... And here Walter paused, and in that pause lived the entire catastrophe. He had gone with a woman named Lauren. Lauren Mitchell, the blonde woman from the showroom, Walter's business partner's daughter. Nathan Cross had left Celeste Dubois at the altar and driven away with another woman while 200 people waited and a 6-year-old girl dropped rose petals on a path that led to nothing. Now, pay attention to what happens next, because this is where Celeste became someone else. She didn't fall. That's the thing people remembered most. She didn't collapse or scream or run. She stood at the end of that aisle and looked at the empty altar, and she took one long, slow breath. She turned to face the congregation. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was steady. She said, "I'm sorry you all came for nothing. Please take the flowers when you leave. They shouldn't go to waste." Then she walked back down the aisle, picked up Rosalie, who was standing frozen with her basket of petals, not understanding, just feeling that something enormous had broken, and carried her out of the church. Vivian followed, clutching her cane, her lavender dress brushing the floor, her face set like stone. They went home. Celeste hung the wedding dress in the closet. She never wore it again. She never threw it away either. She made grilled cheese sandwiches for Rosalie and tea for Vivian, and sat on the porch in the rocking chair and watched the magnolia tree until the sky turned dark. She didn't cry that night. She cried 3 days later, alone in the bathtub at 2 a.m, with the water running so nobody would hear. The town talked. Of course the town talked. A town with 2 traffic lights doesn't forget a man leaving a woman at the altar. But Bellevue didn't just talk. It chose sides. And not everyone chose Celeste. Some people said she should have seen it coming. Some people said Nathan was always too ambitious for a librarian. Some people whispered that Walter Cross had arranged the whole thing because he wanted Nathan to marry into money, not into a yellow house with a rocking chair and a woman who made $14 an hour. Lauren Mitchell's family owned a chain of auto parts stores in 3 states. The math wasn't complicated. The cruelty was simple. Celeste went back to the library on Monday. She shelved books. She ran the reading program. She helped elderly residents with the computers. She closed up at 7 every night. She didn't talk about Nathan. Not to anyone. When people brought it up, gently, carefully, the way you touch a bruise, she changed the subject. She said, "Have you read this one? It just came in." She deflected with books. Books were safer than memory. But this story is far from over. 3 years passed. 3 years of quiet. 3 years of grilled cheese and library shelves, and Rosalie growing taller, and Vivian getting slower, and the magnolia tree blooming and dropping and blooming again. Celeste was 27 now. She had been promoted to head librarian. She made $17 an hour. She had taken an online course in library science and another in grant writing. She won a small grant to expand the children's reading program, $4,000 that she turned into a summer program with guest authors and a reading challenge that got 62 kids to finish a book in 3 weeks. The local newspaper wrote about it. They took a photo of Celeste standing in the children's section surrounded by kids sitting cross-legged on the beanbag chairs. She was smiling in that photo. A real smile. The kind that takes 3 years to rebuild. Rosalie was 9. She still sang her little songs, but now she was writing them down in a notebook with a purple cover. She was less shy than before. She raised her hand in class. She had a best friend named Amara, and they spent weekends drawing pictures of imaginary countries with names like Sparkle Harbor and Moonberry Island. Rosalie still lived in the yellow house. She still called Celeste Tante, but in every way that mattered, Celeste was her mother. Vivian was weaker. The arthritis had spread. She used a wheelchair now most days. But her mind was sharp, and her tongue was sharper, and she still read 2 romance novels a week and still fed the sparrows every morning. And then the invitation arrived. It came in the mail on a Tuesday. Cream-colored envelope, heavy paper, gold lettering. It was addressed to Celeste Dubois. Inside was a wedding invitation. Nathan Cross and Lauren Mitchell. Saturday, October 12th. Ceremony and reception at the Bellevue Grand Hotel. The new hotel on the hill, the one that had opened last year and looked like it belonged in another town entirely. All glass and stone and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Celeste held that invitation in her kitchen, standing over the sink, looking out the window at the magnolia tree. She read it once. She read it again. She put it down on the counter. She picked it up. She put it down. She stood there for a long time. Vivian wheeled herself into the kitchen. She saw the invitation on the counter. She picked it up with her bent fingers and read it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "The nerve of some people could fill an ocean and still have room for sharks." Celeste almost laughed. Almost. What Celeste did next was the beginning of something nobody could have predicted. She didn't RSVP. She didn't throw the invitation away either. She put it in the drawer of her nightstand, next to a photograph of her father and a small wooden cross Alain had carved the year before he died. 2 weeks later, Celeste was at the grocery store when she overheard 2 women in the produce section talking about the Cross-Mitchell wedding. One of them said the hotel was still looking for extra catering staff for the reception. Temporary workers, cash pay. Celeste stood behind a display of apples and listened to this conversation and felt something move inside her. Not anger, not revenge. Something quieter and stranger than that. A need. A need to see. To stand in that room where a man who had promised her forever was promising it to someone else. Not to stop it, not to make a scene, just to see it with her own eyes and know, really know, that she had survived it. She called the catering company. She gave her name as Celeste D. She said she had experience, which was true. She had waited tables in college. They hired her for the night. $65 for 6 hours. Black pants, white shirt, name tag that said staff. But what nobody knew yet was that Celeste was carrying more than champagne glasses into that ballroom. October 12th arrived, a Saturday, cool and clear. The Bellevue Grand Hotel was lit up like a castle. Cars lined the circular driveway. Valets in red vests ran back and forth. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of white. White tablecloths, white flowers, white candles, white chairs with gold sashes. A string quartet played in the corner. 300 guests this time. More than the Baptist church. Bigger, louder, more expensive. Lauren's family had paid for everything. Celeste arrived through the service entrance. She changed in a small room off the kitchen with 6 other temporary staff. 3 women and 3 men, all in black pants and white shirts, all moving quickly, all invisible. She pinned her name tag to her shirt. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she looked different, because she felt different. Stronger, quieter, like a river that had found its way around every rock. The reception began at 7. Celeste carried trays, champagne flutes, bruschetta, shrimp cocktail on tiny white plates. She moved through the crowd with her chin up and her back straight and her eyes seeing everything. She saw Walter Cross at a corner table, broader and redder than she remembered, his toothpick replaced by a cigar that he kept unlit in his mouth because the hotel didn't allow smoking. She saw Nathan's mother, Diane, a thin woman in a green dress who had once told Celeste she was the best thing that ever happened to my son, and then didn't call once after the wedding that wasn't. She saw Lauren, up close for the first time. Lauren was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Perfect skin, perfect teeth, perfect blonde hair pinned with crystal clips that caught the light every time she moved her head. Her dress was designer. Her shoes were designer. Her smile was the smile of a woman who had always gotten what she wanted and didn't understand why that might be a problem. And she saw Nathan. He was standing near the dance floor, talking to a group of men in dark suits. He looked older, heavier. His green eyes were the same, but the boyishness was gone. He had the look of a man who had settled into a life that was comfortable but not exciting, like a couch that was expensive enough to keep but not comfortable enough to love. He held a whiskey glass in one hand. He was laughing at something. The slow smile was there, but it wasn't the same smile. It was a performance now, a reflex. Celeste walked past him 3 times. He didn't recognize her. She was in the uniform, with her hair pinned back, with the name tag that said, staff. She was invisible. The way cleaning staff are invisible. The way waitresses are invisible. The way certain people become invisible the moment they put on the clothes that say, I am here to serve you. She poured his wine. He said, thank you, without looking at her. She set a plate in front of Lauren. Lauren didn't say anything at all. And just when you thought Celeste was going to leave without a word, the night split open. It was 10 o'clock. The toasts were done. The cake had been cut. Lauren had thrown the bouquet. A woman in a red dress caught it and screamed. The string quartet had been replaced by a DJ who was playing a slow song. Couples drifted to the dance floor. The lights dimmed. Celeste was clearing plates near the head table when she heard it. A sound she knew. A small sound. A child's sound. Coming from the hallway outside the ballroom. She set down her tray and walked into the hallway. There, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, was a girl. About 8 years old. Dark hair in a braid. A pink dress with a tulle skirt that fanned out around her like a deflated cloud. She was crying. Quietly. The way children cry when they've learned that no one comes when they're loud. Celeste crouched down. She said, Hey there, are you okay? The girl wiped her eyes. She said, I want to go home. Celeste sat down next to her on the floor, right there in the hallway, in her black pants and white shirt. She said, What's your name, sweetheart? The girl said, Emma. Celeste said, Well, Emma, my name is Celeste. Why do you want to go home? Emma said, Because nobody wants to sit with me. My mom said to sit at the kids' table, but the other kids are mean and they said my dress is ugly. Celeste looked at the pink dress. She said, I think your dress is beautiful. It looks like a sunset. Emma looked at her with wet eyes and a wobbling chin and said, Really? Celeste said, Really. I would wear that dress every single day if I could. Emma almost smiled. She said, You can't. You're too big. Celeste laughed. A real laugh. In that hallway, on that floor, in the middle of the wedding of the man who had left her at the altar, Celeste Dubois laughed because a little girl told her she was too big for a pink dress. She sat with Emma for 15 minutes. She learned that Emma was Lauren's niece, that she liked horses and hated broccoli, and her favorite book was about a girl who could talk to trees. Celeste said, I work at a library. That book is on my shelf. It's one of the good ones. Emma's eyes went wide. She said, You work at a library? That's the best job in the whole world. Celeste said, Some days, I think so too. She walked Emma back to the ballroom. She found Lauren's sister, a woman in a silver dress who looked annoyed rather than concerned, and said, Emma was upset. She might need someone to sit with her for a while. The sister took Emma's hand with the distracted grip of a woman who had other things on her mind. Emma looked back at Celeste. She mouthed, Thank you. Celeste winked. She went back to clearing plates. But something had shifted inside her. Sitting with that little girl, being needed by a child she had never met, reminded her of who she was. Not the woman who was left, not the woman in the uniform. The woman who knelt down to a child's level and said, I think your dress is beautiful. That woman. The real one. Now here is where everything converged. The DJ announced the last dance. Nathan and Lauren moved to the center of the floor. The guests circled around. Cameras flashed. Lauren rested her head on Nathan's shoulder. The song was slow and sweet, and the moment was supposed to be perfect. But the DJ made an announcement first. He said, Before the last dance, the bride and groom have graciously offered an open mic for any guests who'd like to share a few words. Nobody moved at first. Then Walter Cross stood up, walked to the microphone, and gave a short speech about family and legacy and business partnerships, which he seemed to confuse with marriage, but nobody pointed that out. Lauren's father spoke next. then Lauren's maid of honor, then silence. Celeste was standing near the service door, holding an empty tray. Her heart was pounding. She could feel it in her fingers, in her wrists, in the back of her throat. She didn't plan this. She hadn't rehearsed anything. She didn't have a speech in her pocket or a revelation to drop. But standing there, watching Nathan sway on the dance floor in the life he had chosen over her, something rose up inside Celeste that was bigger than bitterness. It was truth, and it wanted out. She set down the tray. She walked across the ballroom. People moved aside, the way people move aside for staff, barely noticing. She reached the DJ booth. She said, "May I?" The DJ looked at her name tag. He hesitated. Then he shrugged and handed her the microphone. The room shifted. 300 heads turned. Celeste stood under the chandelier in her black pants and white shirt, holding a microphone, with every eye in the room on her. Nathan stopped swaying. He looked at the stage. His face went blank. Then it went pale. Then it went white. Because he recognized her. He recognized her. Celeste held the microphone and looked directly at him. He didn't move. Lauren looked from Celeste to Nathan and back. She said, "Nathan, who is that?" Celeste said, "Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste Dubois. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. I'm here tonight as catering staff, serving food and clearing plates. But 3 years ago, I was supposed to be a bride. In this town, in a white dress, waiting at an altar for a man who never showed up. The silence in that room was total. You could hear the ice melting in glasses. She said, "I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm not here for revenge. I've had 3 years to be angry." And I was angry. I was angry for a long time. But tonight, I sat on a hallway floor with a little girl in a pink dress who was crying because she felt invisible. And I held her hand and told her she was beautiful. And I realized that's who I am. That's who I've always been. The person who shows up for the people who feel invisible. She looked at Nathan. He was motionless. His hands were at his sides. His green eyes were locked on her. She said, "Nathan, I didn't come here to punish you. I came here because I needed to see this room and know that I survived what you did to me. And I did. I survived it. I went back to my library and I raised a little girl who isn't mine by blood, but is mine by choice. I took care of my mother. I built a reading program that changed 62 children's summers. I am standing here in a uniform because I work for everything I have, and nothing has been handed to me." Her voice didn't waver. Not once. She said, "So here is what I want to say, and then I'll go back to clearing plates. You left me standing in front of 200 people, and I did not fall. I want you to remember that. Not because I want you to feel guilty, but because I want every person in this room to know that being left does not mean being less. It means the person who left wasn't strong enough to stand beside you." She set the microphone down on the stand. The click echoed through the speakers. She turned and walked back toward the service door. Her white sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, the only sound in the room. Then Emma, little Emma in her pink dress, ran across the dance floor, broke free from her aunt's distracted grip, and threw her arms around Celeste's legs. She said, loud enough for the microphone to catch, "Don't go, library lady. You're my favorite person here." Celeste knelt down. She picked up this child she had met an hour ago and held her and looked over Emma's shoulder at a room full of people who were standing now. Not all of them, but enough. Standing and some of them clapping, slowly, the way applause starts when it means something. Nathan was still on the dance floor. He was looking at Celeste with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not guilt, not shame. Loss. The real kind. The kind you feel when you realize you chose the wrong door and it locked behind you. Lauren was next to him, her crystal clips catching the light, her face tight and confused, asking questions Nathan wasn't answering. Celeste set Emma down. She smoothed the girl's pink dress and said, "I have to go, sweetheart. But you come visit me at the library anytime, okay? I'll have your book waiting." She walked out through the service door, down the back hallway, into the changing room. She took off the name tag. She changed into her own clothes. jeans, a sweater, her regular shoes. She walked to her car in the parking lot and sat behind the wheel and looked at the hotel, glowing on the hill like a lighthouse. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was Vivian. She answered. Vivian said, "How was it?" Celeste said, "I said what I needed to say." Vivian was quiet. Then she said, "Did you fall?" Celeste looked at the hotel and at the sky full of stars and at her own hands on the steering wheel, steady, strong, the hands of a woman who had shelved 10,000 books and braided 1,000 braids and held a child who wasn't hers and called her mine. She said, "No, Mama, I didn't fall." Vivian said, "That's my girl." Celeste drove home. She parked in the driveway of the yellow house. The porch light was on. Rosalie was asleep in her bed with her purple notebook open on the pillow. Vivian was in the rocking chair, wrapped in a blanket, waiting up the way mothers do, not because they need to, but because love doesn't sleep when someone you love is out in the world. Celeste sat down on the porch beside her mother's wheelchair. She didn't talk about the speech. She didn't talk about Nathan or Lauren or the chandelier or the open mic. She just sat there, in the cool October air, listening to the sparrows settling in the magnolia tree. Vivian reached out and took Celeste's hand. Her bent, swollen fingers wrapped around her daughter's and held on. Vivian said, "Your father would have been proud tonight." Celeste said, "I think he was watching." Vivian said, "Of course he was. He never stopped." The next morning, Celeste went to the library. She opened up at 9, same as always. She shelved books. She helped an elderly man print a bus schedule. She set up the beanbag chairs for the Thursday reading group. At 11 o'clock, the front door opened. A little girl in a pink coat walked in, holding the hand of a woman in a silver dress who looked like she hadn't slept. Emma, Lauren's sister, brought her. The sister said, "She hasn't stopped talking about the library lady since last night. She wants to see the tree book." Emma let go of her aunt's hand and ran to Celeste and hugged her around the waist. She said, "I came. You said I could come." Celeste knelt down and looked at this girl with the braid and the bright eyes and said, "I did say that, and I always keep my promises." She took Emma's hand and walked her to the children's section and found the book about the girl who talked to trees. She pulled it from the shelf and handed it to Emma, and Emma held it against her chest like it was something precious and said, "Will you read it to me?" Celeste sat down on a beanbag chair, a grown woman in a library, sinking into a leaking beanbag with a child she met at the wedding of the man who broke her heart, and opened the book. Rosalie wandered over from the coloring table and sat on the beanbag next to them. She looked at Emma and said, "I like your coat." Emma said, "I like your beads." And just like that, two little girls who came from different worlds sat side by side, while a woman who had every reason to be bitter chose to be kind instead. 2 months later, the local newspaper ran a story about the library's expanded reading program. The photo showed Celeste surrounded by children, including Rosalie and Emma, who came every Saturday now. The article mentioned that an anonymous donor had given a $12,000 grant to fund the program for the next 3 years. Celeste didn't know where the money came from. It came from Nathan. He never told her. He never called. He never wrote. He just called the library's administrative office, asked how much the children's program cost to run, and wrote a check. The memo line said, "For the person who shows up." Nathan and Lauren's marriage lasted 14 months. It ended quietly. No drama, no altar. Just two people realizing that a partnership built on family business strategy doesn't survive the first year the business hits a downturn. Lauren moved to the city. Nathan stayed in Bellevue. He kept the dealership. He stopped smiling the slow smile. He got quieter. He volunteered at the food bank on Thursdays, the same day Celeste ran the reading program, though they were in different buildings and never crossed paths. He never asked to see her. She never asked to see him. Some distances are not meant to be closed. They are meant to be respected. Rosalie turned 10 that spring. She had a birthday party in the yellow house with paper lanterns in the magnolia tree, and a cake Vivian supervised from her wheelchair. instructing Celeste on frosting technique with the authority of a woman who had been decorating cakes since before Celeste was born. Emma came to the party. She brought a card she had made herself. Inside, in careful handwriting, it said, "To Rosalie, you are my best friend. From your friend, Emma. P.S. Your tante is the bravest person I ever met." Rosalie showed the card to Celeste. Celeste read it. She read it again. She folded it and held it against her chest. Rosalie looked at her and said, "Tante, why are you crying? It's a happy card." Celeste wiped her eyes and smiled. She said, "I'm crying because it is a happy card, mon coeur. Sometimes happy is so big it leaks out your eyes." Rosalie thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded, very seriously, and said, "I think that's what songs are for. When happy is too big for your eyes, you put it in a song." Celeste pulled this child, this singing, drawing, bead-wearing miracle of a girl who had been left at 2 and found at 3 and raised on library books in magnolia shade, into her arms and held her so tight the paper lanterns trembled in the tree. And Vivienne, sitting in her wheelchair with frosting on her bent fingers and sparrows at her feet, looked at her daughter and her granddaughter and the paper lanterns swaying in the branches and whispered to no one and everyone, "Alain, look at what she built. Look at what our girl built from nothing but love and a stubborn heart." The sparrows scattered and came back. They always came back. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next story.